when I first started mixing, I used to sit down and think, okay, what is this mixing thing I'm supposed to be doing now? Why is that different to what I've been doing for the last 6 weeks making the record? Because it kind of, I've always, with the people I work with and the way I've always done it is I kind of build the mix as you go. So it's kind of, then you get to the end, it's like, well, okay, well, now I'm supposed to mix it. What's the bloody difference, right? So in my mind, I was hearing it with that three-dimensional image. I was already imagining that as I was going along. And so really it was once I discovered that what I needed to do is make that a reality. So everybody else heard, well, I was hearing it in my head. Um, so it made my job a lot easier. But no, it's all very three-dimensional for me. It's trying to create a space that draws the listener in, and it's all very colourful, and music always creates images for me. So that's what I try and do when I mix. So yeah, create a three-dimensional little world that the song lives in.
How do you stay focused on the finer points of the mix while still keeping an objective eye for the
Well, that's always the toughie, I mean, I always find that my best work is the first hour or two, and then after that, it's a matter of trying to not go backwards. What I do now is I move on rather than blabbering over something, because you can get so bogged down in the finer points that really have no bearing on whether somebody's going to like the song or not. They'll put the song on and they'll listen to, 10 bars of it and go, yeah, I don't really like that song. And that's it. And you go, but I've spent, my blood, sweat and tears and that little bit at the end where it's just that perfect. And people just go, I don't really like the song, so it was all a waste of time, really. So the finer points really are satisfying yourself and the musicians and the artists that they've got all the little bits that they wanted to hear across, but really the audience makes a decision brutally, within a very short space of time, and they don't really hear all that stuff. They just either, yes, I like it, or no, I don't like it, but on very basic sort of terms. All of those finer things are, if you do get somebody to really like the song, I like to think that there are lots of things that they can, when they listen to it over and over again, they'll discover new things
yeah.
in the song. They're the things that I try and spend the last couple of hours in when I'm mixing, but I find the first couple of hours, that's when I really either nail it or don't nail it. And then it's about trying not to go backwards and use that extra time, if you're given it,
Yeah.
to create little special moments that you can, that somebody does get into listening to the song, that gives them things to discover the more they listen to it.
Are there any general or habitual approaches you take to your mixes? And if so, would you be willing to share some of these?
It really is always driven by the song. I mean, some songs are beat driven and some songs are top line driven, and so it really depends on the nature of the song. So whether I approach it by getting the groove happening first and then put the vocal in over the top of that, or whether I get the vocal right and then bring, it depends on which way it works. That's when I'm mixing something I haven't recorded. When I've recorded it and produced it, I built the mix up from the beginning. So it's
Yeah.
never going to be that much different from where I'm at when I finish recording it. I just make it, as I say, add all of the three-dimensionality to it that I've been hearing in my head and make that a reality. Because you can't often do that when you're tracking, because it's not a good environment to be in when you're recording a lot of the time, to be in that kind of 3D world, and also with the reduced dynamic range which you need when you're mixing. But when I'm mixing something that I haven't recorded, then I try and find out what's driving the song. Whether it's the groove that is really the thing that's the song's built around, or whether it's a particular hook somewhere. I try and find what is the thing in the song that makes it work, and then build around that. Try and get rid of superfluous stuff. That's the other thing I try and do a lot of certainly not with the stuff I've done because I've tried to do that right from the beginning, but stuff that I'm given, when I get, a file FTP to me and it's got 64 tracks, then, I go into cull mode and try and find out what really is needed and what's not needed and get rid of it. And you find that, you can probably get rid of half of those tracks and you'd still be fine.
Do you find the more tracks, the smaller it sounds, as opposed to having quite a
Yeah,
small
oh,
number of
definitely.
tracks?
Definitely. I think, the endless layering, you end up getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You lose the dynamics and that's usually because the track has been built up from scratch, from bit by bit. It's been layer upon layer and, it gets to a point where you just start going backwards. And then you keep adding more things to try and get that dynamic back and it's a waste of time. And when I've got a track like that, which I just had recently, I just had a track, this 12 snare drum track.
All right, yeah.
It was 12 snare drums, 4 bass drums, 8 hi-hat tracks, all stereo because it was Logic. It was ridiculous. And there were 6 scrap tracks and 12 snare drums. So what I did was I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I just soloed the lead vocal and thought I'll have to bounce some of this stuff down and just sort of find what's going on. I got rid of all the snare drums and just found one decent snare drum. So I bounced it down. And when I was bouncing it down, I just had the vocal and the claps soloed. And I thought, wow, this is the best the song has sounded to me ever. Since, I've been working on it for hours, finding my way through the fog. And when I was bouncing the claps down, I had just had the lead vocal and the clap soloed, and it was the first time I went, this is a really cool song. I actually could hear the lyric, and the melody was really cool because it wasn't getting swamped by all of these pads, which all had different melodies in them. It just confused the actual basic melody of the song, and it was the best it sounded. So I rewrote the bass drum part because it was 3 bass drums playing all different parts. So I just rewrote the bass drum part, got the best sample, put in a new bass drum part, and I had the claps and added the lead vocal. Instead, just added lead vocal in, and then added the BVs in, and then there was a really cool guitar track I found out of the 10 guitar tracks, and it ended up having, I don't know, maybe 16 tracks all up, and it sounded fantastic. I sent it back to the artists, and they went, wow, this is fantastic, and and it was about the 10th different version of this song they'd had. The song itself, the lyric and the melody stood up perfectly fine with just a backbeat.
It didn't need all that other production.
Just didn't need any of it. And it was actually, ruining the song. Because a lot of times when I start producing a track, I can kind of hear what it's going to sound like finished already. But at the end, I've got to actually translate that into an audible reality for everybody else. But often I get quite a good flash of what I imagine the song going to sound like in the end, and that's what I try and build towards.